Welcome to Saucer Squad, the podcast about staying sober in the city, with your hosts, Kate Sander and Jess Valentine.
Hello, squad. Hello, Laura.
Hello, Kate.
Today, guys, we have Dr. P on, author of this amazing workbook, the DBT Workbook for alcohol and drug addiction. Obviously, I'm into it because I'm studying to become a therapist, and thank you for reaching out to me about this. But you're also sober, so I'd love to hear.
Yes.
I want to hear your story and kind of your journey, and then I want to get into this book because I feel like I can't wait to start filling this out. So I know hopefully the squad finds it as useful of a tool as I have in the first 35 pages I've read. So let's get into
Kate.
it.
I'm happy to hear that. So, what it was like, my story, I was born in Southern California, fourth out of 8 children. I was raised in an alcoholic family. I was bullied. There was a lot of neglect, emotional abuse. When I was 13, the company my dad worked for got bought out by 3M, and we had to relocate to Minneapolis, Minnesota, which was a big change for all of us. It was very traumatic for all of us.
Yeah, that's a huge change. I've
And
been
so
to
the
I've
people
been to that campus also because I'm from the Midwest.
oh, okay. So yeah, so getting into, starting high school where I didn't know anyone compared to growing up with people, the easiest group to get into were the druggy alcoholics, the stoners, as we were called back in the day. And that's the group I clicked with. I was drinking, smoking pot. My sophomore year, I got a job and used all the money went towards pot and drinking. So then I was getting high every day, every morning, afternoon, evening. And then I got a full-time job. I was going to school and going to work. And I still had to look good, meaning I was a straight A student. So you can't say anything to me because I'm doing so well.
I'm doing my part.
But I was doing terrible. But anyway, and then I started doing amphetamine. Back then it was called White Cross. Now it's called meth. And, for the first time I felt not depressed, felt somewhat happy, but also a lot of bad side effects, and started getting paranoid and just like, it was just bad, thinking I had things on my skin and I didn't, and it was really gnarly.
How old were
So
you at this point?
at this point, I'm 16.
Okay.
And beginning of my senior year, I decided I'm going to quit speed. And but then I really started crashing like bad. I didn't know about already having complex trauma or depression or any of that back then. And I woke up every morning going to the kitchen and just crying at the kitchen table. My mom finally said, I think, you need help. Psychiatrist gave me a prescription for antidepressant. And initially I felt a little bit better, but then I started feeling suicidal, which is a warning they have on antidepressants now for adolescents, but they didn't have it back then. And one day I just could not take one more step. I was in such despair. And so I went into my parents' cabinet. I took about 200 sleeping pills. I flatlined in the ambulance, dead on arrival. I was in a coma for 5 days.
Good Lord. And at 16, that's such a hard age anyway.
Yeah, well, 17.
Yeah, right.
Or no, was I still? No, I was 17 at this point.
So you woke up 5 days later?
Yeah, and people said, oh, you must have been happy. No, I was
No.
not happy.
Yeah.
Like, not this shit again. Like, I just could not. I had zero tools.
Right.
Like, no,
Right.
my solution was the best one I could come up with, and that began the journey of my recovery. I was in an adolescent psych unit. And luckily, I was in Minneapolis. They're very progressive, the birthplace of Hazelton, very big in 12-step. And this is 1974. Dating myself there. And they had a woman from AA come talk to me, and she goes, I don't think you're crazy. I think you're an alcoholic and addict. And I said, really? I was like, okay. Then she goes, I think you need rehab. I said, great. Not a lot of people say great
No
to
resistance.
rehab.
That's good, at least.
Compared
you needed
to
it.
my situation, anything looked much better. So my parents were not for it. They were like, no way. You need a different school, or
What do you
long-term.
think that was about? Just they didn't know?
Well, I think part of it was it would have maybe exposed their own drinking problem. That was probably the biggest reason. And then also at the time, there was a big split between drug addiction and alcoholism. So they had drug rehabs that were kind of like Synanon, very hardcore. You wear signs,
Oh, right.
These people were, and I never shot up. That's one thing I didn't do, but I was still an addict. But anyway, it was a different crowd. And I think, to looking back, giving them, and I to say this in the book, they just were afraid. But anyway, I told them I can't go home. I didn't say why, but I knew I would try to commit suicide again and I would succeed. That's why I didn't want to go home. I wanted to live. I just didn't know how. I had zero tools.
Not the way you were living before.
Yeah. So, I mean, school was great, but that could only take me so far in terms of living skills. So the woman said, look, you could get emancipated. I'll go through the court system with you. And she did. And then I was emancipated. And I said, I want to go to rehab. And I didn't have a dime in my name. So the county paid for rehab. And I thought I died and went to heaven. It was the first time I was like, wow, this is what a family's supposed to be like. Loving and caring, and there's food, and
people talk to each other. Yeah.
My life. Yeah. Communication. I loved group. I loved it all. I mean, right then and there, I knew I was going to be a therapist, so I think the profession chose me instead of me choosing it. So I was in there for 7 months, loved it, never wanted to leave. But, as people know, eventually I have to leave. Now it's 30 days. But back then, they didn't have that type of managed care stuff or deadlines. So moved out with several other people. We made what they called a sober living situation. And one by one, though, people I lived with went back out. And then I started this thinking, oh, I'm too young to be alcoholic. I'm only 17, blah, blah, blah. So I decided to do some more research and controlled drinking. And it wasn't like before. I mean, before I didn't talk, but I was in a lot of blackouts. I drove in blackouts. How I didn't crash the car is beyond me. Definitely had a higher power with me the whole time. And I would be like you and I talking, and then my controlled drinking would be one beer or two beers on Saturday. So I wouldn't hear a word you said, Kate, because I'd be thinking about, I can't wait till 5 o'clock tomorrow.
Yep.
I don't know what you said, but so the controlled drinking didn't work well. I usually went over my arbitrary limit, and it just wasn't very satisfying.
Isn't that crazy?
I thought, okay, I know.
I did the same thing. When I quit for a year, I thought I was cured. And then the minute I started drinking again, I was just like, I could be talking to you, and out of the corner of my eye, I'd be like looking at how much wine was left and like I call it the mental math of it all. Like just bargaining with yourself about what was going to go down. As I could not get it under control.
Yeah. So yeah, I was sober 11 months, went back out for a year, and then came in. Since I'm 19, I knew what I need to do. I knew where I needed to go, and that was in the rooms. And that's what I did. And so I've been clean, sober September 7th, 1976 is my clean and
Holy
sober date.
crap.
But what was, different about my trajectory in the sense of recovery was it seemed like people were going this way and I was going that way, and I didn't understand. And I got in therapy, was going like once a week. And then probably around my third year, I started feeling worse. I was crying, in despair. I didn't understand what was happening. My therapist asked me if I was suicidal, and I was, but I didn't want to tell her because I thought, oh, wow, I'm clean and sober. I really am crazy. Like, this is ridiculous.
Right.
I called my sponsor at 3 a.m. one night, and she took me to rehab to be in a safe place, not that I picked up. And they did a bunch of psychological tests, and I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. Back then it was called manic depression. And so my Tuesday women's group became my family group. My family during this time, unbeknownst to me, they all moved back to California. I don't even know when that happened.
Oh my goodness.
They all went back, but it all worked out. And so because my family was my family of recovery, people in recovery. And I didn't want to take lithium because at that time, especially, it was like you take something, you're not sober. So I really had a struggle. And then the women in my family group said, if you don't take the medication that's prescribed to you, we're not going to support you. And I was like, oh my God. So my back was against the wall. It was like an intervention. But
that's actually good to hear, though, because it
was great.
There are so many people that alienate.
God only knows where I would have went. I mean, I had deposits on 4 different apartments. No one in meetings could understand me. I have a best friend from back in that day. She said, Laura, you talk so fast. I understood like every third word, but nobody understood you. And so the mania was really
Once you
scary.
got your diagnosis, was it a relief? Did you feel a sense of relief? Like finally?
The medication was a relief.
Okay.
Not so much the diagnosis, because I was like, okay, well, now what? But the medication was like after a few weeks, wow, this is what it's like to be like even, so to speak. But then after 11 months or 12 months, maybe a little bit over a year, I thought, I'm doing fine. I don't need this medication.
Why do we do that? I
don't know. Well, I know now. I mean, part of it is, suffering. So subsequently, I was on this antidepressant or that antidepressant, but that wasn't my major my main diagnosis. So it helped with the depression, but not with, my mania, or my mania was very low. But I think part of it was the only time I felt up, and that was just a little, was when I was on no medication. So it was hard to give up. That's why I didn't want to stay on. I didn't realize at the time, but, then 35 years moving forward, a therapist said, I was just starting therapy with this new therapist, and he said, what type of mood stabilizer are you on? The other 2 therapists didn't even do a thorough history, like maybe a few years, but not back to adolescence. And I said, what's today? Thursday. It's been 35 years. And he's like, what? So, not being on a mood stabilizer affected my recovery almost like drinking would affect your life. And so, because I listened to people, I'd say, God, my life sounds like that, even though I'm clean and sober. What is wrong? A lot of ups and downs, irritability, anger. So anyway, then fast forward about 5 years from that, my oldest daughter, I came out in recovery when I was newly sober. My therapist gave me a journal, and this is 1974. I was very afraid, and I wrote in it, I think I'm a lesbian. I was so scared to tell anyone.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to hate me. Everyone's going to think I'm a sicko. And so that was a struggle. I think that's why I actually partly went out during that 1 year, because I really struggled with accepting my sexuality. But then my daughter goes to college. I hit this really bad depression again, and nothing's really working. So they gave me what's called TMS. It's kind of like the new boutique electric shock therapy, and it triggered me into a manic mania, and it was a total nightmare. It was worse than when I was 21.
Wow.
So they put me on like triple the dose of lithium. And then my psychiatrist suggested, hey, why don't you try the DBT group? It's an intensive 6-month program. And I welcomed it. I was like,
Yeah,
oh,
you were like, I'll
please.
try anything.
I was hanging on by my fingernails. This was not good. I mean, I was going to meetings all the time, but that was just a small part of what was happening. And during one of the groups, this therapist said, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional. And I said, oh my God, I hear that in the rooms all the time. But I said, the how to always eludes me.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm suffering most of my recovery. I don't get it.
Yeah.
Like, I try the tools in AA, but no offense, but there's not a lot.
Well, and they're a little bit doomy and gloomy.
Yeah.
AA can be like a little foreboding.
In DBT, there's 200 tools.
Yeah.
So that's when I thought, I'm going to write a book.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is my second book. This would be great. DBT would be so great for people in recovery.
Yeah.
Or people that are thinking about getting in recovery.
Because also a lot of people are like, what do I do? And it's like, well, don't drink. Right? But it's like, it's so much more than that's the easiest thing and the hardest thing is what I tell people. It's the easiest thing and the hardest thing. But I think AA can be a turnoff for a number of reasons. I mean, I've talked about it ad nauseum on the podcast, but that's what I like about this is that I think that the steps, however, are very powerful. But I think that it alienates a lot of people with all the other stuff surrounding it. So I like that I'm holding up her book for those of you that can't see me, but she breaks down the steps and then the DBT version of the steps. And I think that's what's so powerful about this workbook is that it actually tells you what to do and kind of correlates it back to the AA steps and traditions, which are, I think, valuable. But I just think that there's a lot of dogma and, there's a lot of like stuff covering all of the good stuff up, to me at least, for the rooms.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to wade through it,
Mm-hmm.
For some people. I mean, I've worked in prisons where the guys didn't even understand the language. Like, Dr. P, what are they talking about?
Yeah.
John Barleycorn, who the hell is that?
Mm-hmm.
Or, work doing women's groups, finding the language offensive in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. P, it's always he, and I already feel powerless and my ego's already below the ground. Why do they want to knock it down further? It's already, below sea level. That doesn't help me. So, yeah, I understand. And again, I like DBT because it can complement the program. It says, okay, here's your concept. Here's your first step. Mm-hmm. But instead of just don't drink, here's some ways not to don't drink. And that's, I think very helpful.
Yeah. What I love is, okay, so kind of explain to us, break down DBT in very layman's terms, because I think even like sometimes the letters are scary. I mean, even to me, and I'm studying this stuff and like the who's he, what's it's from white guy wrote this book, like made this theory up. So break that down for us.
Yeah. So DBT stands for dialectical behavioral therapy, and that is definitely a mouthful. Mm-hmm. So DBT has three prongs to it. It was developed by Dr. Marsha Linehan, and she was studying women who suffer from what's called borderline personality disorder. She was using cognitive behavioral therapy, which is looking at our thoughts and how usually negative thoughts affect our negative behavior, and also doing some meditation. But the women still weren't really progressing. Weren't making a lot of progress. And then she added dialectic. And a dialectic is opposites, but yet both are true, meaning not until I accept that I'm an alcoholic and addict can I change. Mm-hmm. That's a dialectic. Not until I accept myself for where I am right today can I change.
Right.
Another dialectic would be, I write in the book, we're going through a major pandemic and this too shall pass. Mm-hmm. So it's a both and is a dialectic instead of either or. A lot of alcoholics, myself included, we get into, black and white thinking and have a hard time finding the gray, let alone living in the gray. Mm-hmm. And DBT helps us to live in the middle and find balance. instead of being in this emotional dysregulation.
I love that
Which
that's the skills and strategies for emotional regulation, recovery, and relapse prevention. I'm like very into emotional regulation right now because I think I'm able to now spot dysregulation much more, my own dysregulation, other people's dysregulation. Now I've become obsessed with the concept of like, that goes back to those extremes of like me being 0 to 100 or me being like perfectly fine and then, manifesting the worst or best case scenarios of everything. And now it just makes me feel like a toddler. You know how a toddler will go from 0 to 60, throw the tantrum in Walmart. And now when I see behavior like that, I just feel like everybody's being an adult toddler, like myself included. But it's helped me to like calm down, to be like, okay, adults have to verbalize their feelings. They can't just scream and throw a tantrum. And, we have to like be adults about this. And that's
DBT
easy
really
to
helped
say,
me
but
with
it's hard.
adulting.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, they talk about adulting in the program, but I was just totally at a loss. One of my friends at one point, I was struggling with my daughter when she was a teenager, and I started reading it, and it talked about when your teenager's out of control and this and that. And she called me. She goes, "Well, how do you like the book so far?" I said, "It's great, but it's talking about me, not her."
Yeah.
This is me. I'm the 16-year-old here in the book. So yeah, DBT really helps, to gain that awareness and to, the program talks about responding rather than reacting. But again, how do I get from A to Z?
Right.
How do I not react? And there's a lot of tools. One is meditation, mindfulness, like what am I experiencing right now? Crisis skills that are very good when we're about to go to 100, the stop skill, taking a step back, taking your temperature, proceeding mindfully, literally stepping back. And it's really changed my life, as much as getting clean and sober did. And that's another reason I wanted to write the book, because I've been in recovery for years. And yet even the promises weren't happening. I'm like, I don't get it. I can't be defective in that much regard. So, but this was the puzzle piece that was missing. And even though I was in therapy, which has been helpful for sure, but DBT, again, this is evidence-based skills that continue to make a difference. And also a difference in the women I sponsor and the clients I am a therapist to.
What do you think is the most important step in this journey in this workbook? I mean, I'm assuming they're all very important, but what do you think is the most crucial to get?
I would say the mindfulness and the meditation, because until I slowed down, I was always, even if I wasn't, in a manic state, I was pretty much 80 miles an hour kind of life, like from 5 a.m. till midnight. I didn't really, I would do a 4th and 5th step every few years. I would do a 10th step, but I didn't really slow down that much to see what was going on with me or my life, and so meditating helped me like gain a few seconds from that reacting to respond, and being mindful just, help me get out of this automatic type of behavior and like, okay, wait, stop. What is my goal here?
I feel like it keeps us very much in the reaction and not proactive.
Yeah.
Like I remember telling my therapist, like, I feel like I'm in the passenger seat of the car and it's my life and it's driving so fast and so out of control, but I'm not the one driving it. I'm just like in the front seat, like trying to put my seatbelt on. She's like, well, that's because you're reactionary to everything. You're not slowing down to and I
And
think a lot
that,
of us in recovery are in survival mode, and maybe that comes from our
right,
trauma. Maybe I'm projecting, but it's like going from one extreme to the other, to just like scramble and be hyper vigilant to have all of our bases covered, or the
yes.
opposite of picking up, drinking, using, just to like numb all of that away. So I don't have to be so
Mhm.
worried, so anxious, so on 12 all the time, that I was never able to make a proactive decision because I was constantly on the defense.
Right. Exactly, Kate. We're constantly in survival
Mm-hmm.
mode. Like you said, reacting as a way to survive or manage, or like you said, be defensive.
Mm-hmm.
And so the skills that help me respond rather than react are the most helpful
Mm-hmm.
um, to me in the book. And how to get to using those skills took meditation and mindfulness, to be able to even think, or really to think, okay, what tool would be helpful here? Because there's 4 different modules and there's just so many different tools. Okay, what would be helpful here? Um, is it interpersonal effectiveness?
Mm.
Is it emotional regulation? Like what, first it's just deciding, or, thinking about what category, and then within that category, what's the most helpful tool? But yeah, I was just a big reactor ball, like an atomic reactor. That was me. I was
Mm-hmm.
just one big ball reacting. And, people are like, oh, here she comes.
Right.
I remember I used to travel a lot for a living, and I was so embarrassed. Like, I remember there was always some kind of problem, it seemed, with the flight, but I didn't handle it in the best way. And one time I was going to the United counter and I saw them kind of go down, like cower. And I remember calling my partner, like, what? She goes, Lori, you're too demanding when you're up there.
Mm-hmm.
You're too reactive. It's not their fault the flight is late or whatever the problem of the day
Right.
is. But that was like a wake up call, like, wow, I'm just a big reactor ball.
Mm-hmm.
What is going on? Um,
Yeah. I've noticed in myself recently that slowing down is like impossible for me. But I realize that a lot of uh, uh, the problem I think I have with it is I'm also used to distraction as a pacifier. So I need external stimulation in order to distract me from my own like despair. So I keep myself in this perpetual mode of busy, but then also
mm,
stress and anxiety because I'm trying to avoid whatever feeling or person or conversation or whatever it may be. But like
right.
this has been the sole source of my anxiety for, and it's like all made up things, like made up deadlines, made up appointments, made up like keeping up with people that I don't even know in real life. Like why am I doing I'm holding up my phone. But
Yeah, like, why do you care? Yeah,
right, why
why
do
do I
I
care?
care? But it's also, it becomes addictive in and of itself, just the like action
Mhm.
of picking up and putting it down, but it's just this constant, news ticker of like either like comparing or pain or tragedy or like all the stuff that like lights us up, right? As people with addiction, all of those extremes are like lighting my little brain up and keeping me awake. And I realized like I recently had just had so much anxiety that I deleted all of the apps off of my phone, like even my faves. I had to let them go, and I was like, I'm just going to see what happens. And it has brought me more peace of mind than, I don't know, anything that I've done for myself probably in the last couple of years, just because it has taken the distraction away. Not that I'm like dealing with my feelings, but that's a whole other discussion.
One
But it's
step
at
at a
least
time.
clearing the space, right? So that I
Mhm.
can kind of, my
Yeah, to
mind
make
is
that
more at
space
rest.
available.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes. And I think that's
Yeah.
because we all think we're so busy. But it's these things like creating busy in our lives because we're like tired because we've been consuming all this information. We're not actually that busy. We're just
No,
tired.
it's empty busyness.
Right.
When I see at the end of the day and it says how much time I spent on the phone, I'm mortified.
Right.
I am mortified. I'm like, okay. And I really consciously make a choice to purposely cut down, or
Mm-hmm.
I got these timers my
Oh
therapist
yeah.
recommended. It's So I give myself 15 minutes on social media, then that's it,
Mm-hmm.
you know. And I cut out most of my social media. Well, now I hired an admin assistant and she tells me what's going on. I don't
Mm-hmm.
even look at it.
Yeah, it's good to have that filter, right? Then you
Yes,
can
it
like
is.
have the
That's a good way
bolster.
to put it.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Because otherwise I get caught up. Yeah.
Yeah, and I get
Yeah.
really anxious about like being accountable to others. Like, I mean, even when I had to reschedule our interview, like I'm like mortified to do that stuff, but it's also like we make up these deadlines. It's like things can wait, you know? We're just used to this immediacy and this very rigidity, and I've had a really demanding career where like we had print deadlines and we went to market, and so we were always up against the clock. My time was never my own, but I realized like all of that is made up. Somebody made all of
Mm.
that stuff up. You know,
Mhm.
if the box didn't make it to the FedEx, like we all just waited. And I think that's what I'm
Right.
trying to move forward with is like there are very few things that really are life and death, and I have to like tell myself that over and over and over. That there are very few things,
Mhm.
Kate, that will actually make or break today. So like you
Right.
cannot let it get to me, because otherwise I get all wound up and spiral, and that's when I become like at risk to myself and others.
Hmm. And others, yeah.
Emotionally, that's when that dysregulation comes in.
Hmm.
So I love that. I'm all about, okay, so the 4 modules, we have mindfulness, interpersonal effectiveness. Break
Yes.
that down.
Interpersonal effectiveness. Um, so there's, yeah, how we relate to others. But part of it is um, looking at the level of importance who we're interacting with.
Ooh.
So so my family and partner or daughter, those are the ones they're my innermost circle,
Mm.
and then the circles get larger. And I'm going to put more energy into people I'm closest to and practice those skills more so than, you know, interaction with a customer service person.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's part of it, is first looking at who's the most important. And then that's where you're going to, I feel for me, work on these skills the most. And then it's looking at my values and goals. Okay, so let's say, I don't know, my daughter and I having a disagreement. What's my goal out of this conversation?
Mm.
Because in the past, my goal was whatever I was deciding, was going to be the best for her.
Was right. Yeah, I want
Um,
to be
I
right.
mean, when kids are little, yeah, being right.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, but when they're getting older, then that's not true. Um, so do I want to have more relationship or just like be right,
Mm-hmm.
or but I am right, but
Right.
that sort of
Yeah,
thing. Um, and in the past, it was, just whatever was happening for me at the time. I wasn't, thinking about what kind of relationship I want, especially when you have a child. It's then they become an adult. Then they don't have to deal with you.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is that what I wanted? No.
Right.
So, because I know plenty of people who talk about being estranged from their kid, and I didn't want that. So, looking at these different tools, and so one of the tools are in terms of being in crisis. So let's say you feel like you want to be in an argument or you're just about to, like the stop skill.
Mm.
Another skill is please. So that's where the PL stands for the physical, you're taking care of yourself.
Mm.
The E stands for evenness. Are you meditating? Are you being mindful? The A is, being accepting. The S, what does the S stand for? Oh my God, it just went out of my head.
They'll have to find
And
out when they get the book.
yeah, you'll have to find out when you get the book.
It's a cliffhanger. We don't know.
Um, but there's just so many great skills.
Well, I like that there's like a little like library of what do I feel like I need today? What do I need to work on? And okay, so there's interpersonal effectiveness. Then there's emotional. I was like trying to pick what I think my favorite is, and I'm like, I don't know. It depends on the day. Like Number 3 is emotional regulation, and number 4 is distress tolerance,
Right.
which
So,
is scary, but very important.
so let's just say, let's go back to emotional regulation skills. I mean, first of all, it's important to look at, a lot of times. So again, going back to emotion regulation, part of it is, what are we choosing to look at? A lot of times what we choose to look at is not even what's most important. Also, what are we thinking about the situation? This is where I think I did a lot of work, because there's a lot of gaps in communication. So like me being late, I don't know what you thought, but for me, if someone was late, I think, oh, they don't care. Oh, they're just blowing me off. Oh, I'm not important to them. When meanwhile, oh, she got stuck in traffic. She couldn't get here. But I would usually assume the worst. But then not only assume the worst, then we act on
then
that.
silently, then take it out on you. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then we act on it. Like, so let's say you came on, you're like, well, gee, Dr. P, I guess I'm not that important, or whatever.
Yep. Yep.
And that's how I could be. So then, looking at that.
Which essentially like shits on the possibility of what could have happened from a good perspective.
So, one of the things my therapist taught me was assuming positive intent. Because I used to assume negative intent. I didn't care who you were, or it didn't matter who you were, because how I grew up, it was negative intent for probably 95% of the time. So that was so much a part of my trauma history. But when I started assuming positive intent, my relationships started getting so much better. Because when we're assuming negative intent, like you were talking about earlier, we get in that defensiveness. And that, of course, pushes people away.
Yeah.
Or it makes it very hard to have
and culturally, we like assume negative intent, just like as a culture, right? It's like, maybe that's just because we've had so much news, like bad news, but there's always like, everybody's sus about, are you really trying to be nice to me? Or like, what are you trying to get out of this?
I mean, I think it's important to trust our gut. That will say, like just for instance, earlier today, I got off, I was riding with the group, and then this person knew, but anyway, I started riding with someone who wasn't one of the leaders. And I said, I don't think this is the right way. My gut told me, oh, stranger danger, it was the wrong way. But I didn't act on that, which I hate when I do that or don't do that. And then finding out later we were in the wrong, we finally found them. But, so sometimes our assuming negative intent or a gut feeling is trying to warn us or protect us. But the other times it's not. We're assuming negative intent, and it's because of the news, but it's mainly because of our background, of our trauma. That's really more what it comes from.
Right.
Not even so much the news. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
very
really
true.
the problem. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like emotional regulation will be one I'll be working on for a very long time. I'm getting better though. Like even at my internship I've been having like a few difficult personalities to deal with. And my other clients are like, somebody said to me, so when they were like, honestly, I thought I was going to learn nothing from you. I just looked at you like a prissy white lady, and I wrote you off. And I was like, I mean, thank you for feeling comfortable to share that with me. And I totally would have assumed that you would have thought that. Right. And then another client was like, wait a minute, like, I don't think that's fair. And I was like, but I'm not offended by what she said. She was telling me the truth. And he was like, well, I'm offended for you. And I was like, well, you can be, but I'm not mad about this. And so it was interesting that like before I think that would have bothered me.
They rallied to your defense. Yeah.
But it was like a testament to my more emotional regulation, like my working on it, I guess, is to like be like, it's okay to not be liked. And I think before that would make me definitely dysregulated and act differently. And
Oh,
that also
yeah.
goes to like distress tolerance, right? Like,
Yes.
I can tolerate now people not liking me because I like myself, whereas before that was totally intolerable.
Oh, yeah. Because if you don't like me, I don't like me.
Right.
So, yeah, it was contingent upon, or my
Mm-hmm.
self-esteem was contingent upon your view and
Absolutely.
opinion of me. And some of the other distress tolerance skills, so distracting ourselves could be positive. Using, if you really upset, cold water
Mm.
is something to recommend. Or when I worked with kids in both middle school and high school, I'd recommend they carry these ice packs that as soon as you break them, they're cold, and they carry them in the backpacks. And so kind of an instant distress tolerance. Also self-soothing skills. This, I did today. We were at a light. So the thing about bicycles, they don't trip the light
Right.
unless there's a car there. So we're sitting there. It seemed
Mm-hmm.
like forever. And one of the self-soothing skills is patience. Patience. So I started doing that. My friend's like, what are you doing? I said, I'm telling myself to be patient.
Right.
Because there were two other people who were really starting to ramp up.
Yep.
And I thought, nope. And then, of course, as with everything, this too shall pass. And that really helped.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And it's interesting that you even use that example because it's probably not about the light, right? Like you're not actually mad about the light. You're mad about like what the light is preventing you from, which is escalating
yes,
your,
because we were
it's
getting close to the lunch spot.
right,
Yeah.
right.
So it's getting in the way.
Mm-hmm.
Another tool is improve the moment.
Mm.
That could be prayer. That could just be focusing on one thing at a time. Radical acceptance. This is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Like one examples they give is rain. And so the person in radical acceptance is, yep, it's raining. A person not in radical, oh, I hate that it's raining. Oh, I was going to do
Mm-hmm.
this. Oh, I was going to do that. Another skill is willingness.
Mm.
And then another skill that actually has been really helpful is called half smile. So when we half smile, at first I thought, oh my God, this is going to look dorky. But
I feel like I do this all the time.
but you know what? First of all, when we smile, it does something to our brain in a
Okay.
good way. And also, I didn't realize a lot of times that, when I was irritated, people saw it.
Mm. Oh
People
yeah.
stay away
Uh-huh.
if someone looks angry or whatever. So especially during a challenging conversation or just a conversation where I disagree with the person, I do a half smile and it would lower my potential reaction.
Yeah, your adrenaline.
Yeah, and would also kind of smooth things. It does kind of smooth things between me and the other person. And it really, I have found very helpful. Another distress tolerance skills is open hands. So a lot of times when we sit, our hands are like this on our thighs. But try this.
Okay.
It's really interesting because we're being open to everything and everyone. And we're being less defensive in that regard. So that's really helpful too. And then another thing is just turning our mind, focusing on something else. So, and part of it's like distraction, but it's also specifically focusing on something else. So, like just for me, when I was driving here, or back home, I was getting more anxious. And I just thought, okay, focus. What can I focus on instead of this traffic? I'm going to focus on being there. I'm going to focus on Kate being very pleasant and nice. I'm going to focus on, having a great podcast. Instead of before, I would have been, I'm late. It's all bad. It's all bad.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the all or nothing.
Yeah.
Um, and like, oh, here was another decision, and a good one, because I was running low on gas. I said, you could probably make it. I said,
Oh,
Lord,
that's
is that worth it?
stressful.
But then you'll be sitting on the side of the road for a half hour.
Yeah.
So I said, what is the mindful decision? Get gas.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, to prevent a further catastrophe potentially, right? And like
yes,
also just quell
yes.
that anxiety amongst all the other ones.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, when I
Yeah.
start to feel out of control, I'm like, okay, take 5 minutes and what can you do that's right in front of you so that you can feel back in control a little bit. Like if it's like, oh, my house feels like chaos. Like even when I first got on, actually, that's why I'm glad you were a little bit late, because I like turned my camera on and it was like a mess. And I was like, I can't. I was like, I could, but like, no, I can't show up like this. I was like tidying and putting things away. And that gave me just a minute to like chill out, because it's like we run around it and I don't know if you feel this way, but for me, subconsciously, it there's anxiety, right? Like I'm looking forward to this, but there's still anxiety. Like, is she going to enjoy doing this? Like, am I going to say the right thing? Are we going to talk about the things she wants to? So it's something that I thought about all day, even though I was looking forward to it, but there is still a level of stress, right, involved, because it's something that we've never done before. So yeah, I did take like 5 minutes to kind of like distract myself. It was like 5:50 and I'm like, well, this is a painful 10 minutes. Like, what am I doing? Sitting here and worrying. Yeah. So I think that definitely, and I think that also goes into like, they kind of all mesh together, right? Like all the modules kind of work together also. You can't really have one without the other. If you're working on distress tolerance, you're also working on your emotional regulation and mindfulness, so that's what I like about it. And like literally, I'm going to hold the book up for those of you that are watching on video. There's like literal activities that you can fill in and do. And that's what I love about all the different modules, is that you don't have to go in a linear, you don't have to like start at the beginning and finish the book page by page. You can kind of flip to whatever
like
you
program.
need.
Take what you like and leave the rest. And also I recommend getting a journal or some kind of spiral bound where because there's room to write, but not a lot of room. So that's something else I recommend for clients or for people to get a spiral bound notebook or a journal to write in your responses.
Yes. And what I also especially like about it is that it sort of, I don't want to say dilutes the dogma, but it does dilute the dogma, I guess, and makes it we're a little bit I don't want to say anti-dogma, but it can get a little heavy, I think, with the AA stuff. So for example, I'm just going to read one of the steps and then your DBT translation. So step 3 is seeking knowledge of a higher power's will for you and deciding to turn over your will and be restored to balance. Like, that's heady. The DBT translation is, we surrender our old way and trust DBT skills to teach us a new way of life. Like, that feels on some level more manageable and less like we're giving this up and, all will be well.
Because giving it up, who wants to give it up? I mean,
and who are we giving it to? Like, where is it going?
And what's going to be there? Like they call the donut in the hole, or the hole in the donut. It's true. Okay. So not a lot of people are going to give up, even if it's not working, to just some non-entity or entity. But, I give up this and then I use that. That fills the gap.
Yes.
That I think is more effective. And that's actually a word I use more often now. Is this effective? Am I being effective? Okay. So is this conversation, am I being effective? Am I being effective if I choose this particular course of action?
I think that also goes well with what you said before about the goal. Like, what is my goal out of this interaction? Is it to like blow smoke up Kate's ass for an hour, or, like, what do I want? I want to obviously like talk about my experience. And I think about that a lot as well. And for me, it's helped me kind of audit, like, if I do feel myself escalating, like, what are the parts of the conversation I can take and leave, and knowing that I like stood in my integrity while having the conversation, if it's a difficult one, or
Exactly.
if it's, you know, something I maybe am uncomfortable talking about. That's helped me a lot too.
Yes, exactly. That's a good point.
Like,
Yeah.
I think about it, and this might be a stupid example, but I've never understood the people that write back a mean email. You know, like in the heat of the moment, the people that'll just like rip off a
Oh
terror,
yeah.
like a mean email and send it to like somehow, you know, posture themselves. I've never understood it because A, it's a paper trail. Weird. You really want to go back on that email reply chain and see like your nasty reply from 2 weeks ago? And
Mhm.
B, it's just, what is this accomplishing? It just like makes you look like an asshole. So that's what I
Yeah.
think about in life is like, don't write the mean email. Like, take 1 minute, write like an like you said, effective and maybe like direct, assertive email, but like, don't be a dick.
Mhm. Yeah. Or I recommend to clients, don't put the email address.
Mm.
Like you could write the body of
Mm-hmm.
it and you could write it 10 times,
Mm-hmm.
but don't put who you're sending it to. Just write.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then by the 10th email, if it sounds good, run it by someone and then you could put
Yeah.
the email address and then send it. But yeah, you got to, well, I think, yes, there's a paper trail, but again, it's that reactive, and whether it's email or text, um, like I have clients who get into, reactive texting,
Mm-hmm.
and this looks, it's like, you got to slow down.
Totally. That's so easy. It's such a trap. That's such a good
Yeah, it's
example.
the same thing. We just,
Yep.
anger texting, rage texting. It's not healthy for anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's waiting to speak or email or return that phone call or text, I tell them, let's do one of the type of breathings they call paced breathing. So you breathe in
Mm-hmm.
3, but you breathe out 5.
Okay.
And it somehow slows your breathing down more than if it's an even number of in and out breaths. And it really is effective.
Yeah, slows you down.
Yes.
Oh yeah, the rage text. Well, now that I like know about emotional regulation, I want to be the best at it. So I am I really try to like out emotionally regulate the person I'm feeling heated against. Like, you will not get the reaction out of me that you want. You are going to get,
Right.
you know what I mean? You are going to get
Yes.
a
Yeah.
totally composed, I'm going to win this battle of composure.
Yeah.
So that at
Yeah.
least helps me stay a little bit more motivated because I'm going to be the best at it.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I'm probably not,
Sure.
never
Or
the
also, I
best.
want to surprise them
Yes.
because I've had a couple of people, say, um, after I finished the program, they're like, "Wow, I thought you'd be upset." Nope.
You're like, no, I'm the best.
Nope. It doesn't serve me, and it definitely wouldn't serve you.
Mm-hmm.
So not so much the best as it's not
My
good for me.
best.
It's not good for my mental health, and it
No.
wouldn't be good for our relationship. And it's definitely not good for you to be the recipient.
Mm-hmm.
So,
That's a better way to think about it. All right. So, what is there anything else that you think people need to know about this? But obviously, people get this, and we can do the workbook together and become
um,
the best at emotional regulation.
so did you say where they could get the book?
Yeah, well, they can get it anywhere, right? Anywhere books are sold.
You, Barnes and Noble,
Okay.
Amazon. Um, please write a review if you like it.
Mm-hmm.
I'd appreciate it.
Support Dr. P, of course.
So it's down the line yet, but I am going to be starting DBT and 12-step meetings. But I haven't started that yet, but that's coming. Similar to, well, there's so many 12-step meetings
Mm-hmm.
For different issues, but so you'll be able to work in the workbook in a group setting,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is always really helpful. Healing in a group.
Definitely.
That's why in recovery, we're in a group. You don't have to do this alone. Or do it with a therapist, I think is really helpful. Or a sponsor. I'm actually working with a sponsee who wanted to do it with me. I said, okay. So if that's possible, I recommend that too. And I think, I hope you'll notice a difference. I know, it helped me. I've been sober a long time, and this, like I said earlier, was a piece that was missing. And I wanted to share with other people that if I could do it, you could do it too. And also to offer hope, because sometimes you hear in the rooms, well, if you're miserable, you might as well go back out and drink
Oh,
or
wow.
drug.
Uh-huh.
I know, horrible, right? It's like, well, I've been miserable a lot of my recovery. I don't think going back out there would have been a really good idea.
Yeah, I really
So,
related when
but
you said that 3-year like wall that you hit. I definitely
yeah,
had the same thing, and I'm like, do I need to do the steps? Like, what help? Like, what am I? I'm doing everything I'm supposed to be doing. Like, why am I so
yeah,
depressed?
right. And it doesn't mean we're not doing it right. It's just, for a lot of us, there is underlying mental health struggles,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not really talked about very
Most
much.
of us, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like I think the research is like 80% of people who have alcohol or drug use or addiction have underlying mental health
Mm-hmm.
issues. So I think to neglect those or not talk about it is irresponsible.
Agree.
It's neglectful and important to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah. What does your recovery look like now, as an elder sober person? I don't mean elder, but like I said, I talk
Right,
about it.
right.
I'm like 7 years. I feel like I'm kind of reaching I don't know, quarter life sobriety. I don't know,
My,
barely out of teenage sobriety, I guess.
my recovery looks like, I go to 2 meetings a week. Now that, we could go back in person, I'm so happy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I secretary a meeting every other week, LGBT meeting. Um, now that we're out of COVID, sponsoring again. And but with this newfound knowledge, I feel this balance that even with, the lithium for my bipolar disorder, only it helps somewhat, but I really feel a sense of balance now. And I feel like I want to share this with as many people as I can. That's another
Yeah.
reason I wrote the book. And I think it took, like, I really thought, okay, God, probably after 10 years, you'll help me write a book. And, I'm going to change the world. A little grandiose there. But I think it also took what it took, meaning this many years, because like you were sharing earlier, Kate, I still so much struggle with what people say, what people think. And not that it doesn't matter at all, but now in the, era of social media,
Matters, yeah.
yeah, it I would have been slammed. I would have like fallen over, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like I have the tools now, whether people like the book, don't like the book, could use the tools, don't use the tools, whatever. I could move past that or move through it much easier. Um,
Well, I also
so
like in the
that's
book that you tell your story coincided to the tools. So you talk about your experience. It's not like a textbook at all or like a how
no,
to, you know.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, because initially it was going to be a how-to. And then some of my early readers said, Laura, why don't you tell your story?
Yeah, that's
And I
helpful.
said, I'm a psychologist and I'm a professional and I have clients. And they said, yeah, but you would connect with people better if you told your own story. And
Mm-hmm.
so I decided to weave it in. And so really, thank you for reminding me that, because I do feel it's a better book telling my own story.
Well, and you get to show up
Um,
as yourself. I think also like
yeah,
I've thought about this a lot because I didn't want to become a therapist till after I started this podcast, and I wanted to help people in a really like responsible and authentic way because so many people started to reach out to us for help that I didn't just want to get a coaching certificate that felt irresponsible, that I was like, no, I need to go learn how to actually help people. And I've gone back and forth about like, oh, have I said too much? I've definitely said too much. However, like I controlled that narrative, and the way the world works now, people were going to find out eventually anyway, or something, you know what I mean? Something would have, at least now I get to tell my story and somebody doesn't tell it for me. And through sharing it, like, you know, in the rooms, it gives you, it takes its power away, the negative stuff that I've done by me sharing it.
Yeah.
You know, and if that deters
That's a
some
good
clients,
point.
fine. Okay. Then yeah, don't work with me, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's all out there, you know?
Yeah. I like that idea. Yeah. If we share who we are, we control the narrative. That's really true. And it takes the power out of it. Like, bring it, you know,
Yeah.
because
if somebody had found out this stuff about you, right, and like shared that without maybe your consent or something, that would have felt very, very violating. But at least now you get to, I think that it's better that, you know, somebody was telling me this today in my group when I was at my internship, is they were like, you've walked through it, so it's easier to talk to you because you've walked through it versus somebody that hasn't. You know, I don't know that I would want to read this book if you were just speculating on addiction.
Oh, I see. Yeah, that's a good point.
You know?
Well, I mean, yeah, that's the reason, you know, the program works so well. One alcoholic talking to another, sharing what worked for us.
Right.
And then hopefully that could help the next person.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially in the beginning when I worked in the field, I'd hear that from clients a lot. Oh, well, at least you're in recovery. I could relate to you better than so-and-so over there. Yeah.
Yeah. And I see
There's
it
a
in the
big
difference
truth in
in my colleagues that don't have, you know, problems with addiction. Like it's not that clients don't trust them, but it's just different. You know, it's a different perspective. They kind of feel like they're being talked at, not, you know, not with. So I really appreciate that about it. So, well, thank you so much. Did we leave anything out? Where can everybody find you if you want them to find you?
Do you have my social media contacts?
Yeah, I can put
that
your
you can
social
put in
media.
your
Yep.
show? Okay, great.
But tell them,
And,
is it like, are you just let me find you here, at Laura, Petracek PhD on Insta. That's a mouthful, but I'll put the links on Instagram and the show notes as well. But you can find her. Are you accepting new clients if they're in California?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You can work with her. Guys, we're getting you all set up. If you don't live in California, you can still get the book, and we can DBT our way to emotional regulation together. And I thank you so much for your time. This was really great.
Thank you so much for having me on the show, Kate. I really appreciate it.
I want to have you back when I get when I get into it. Then you can come and tell me everything I did wrong.
Would welcome that very
Awesome.
much so.
Well, thank you so much, and we will talk to you soon. Squad, be nice to yourself, and till we meet again, don't forget, hangovers suck.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. Every review helps other listeners find us. Music by Dead Go West. Art by Kate Sander. For show notes and resources, check out seltzersquad.com.